Good Friday afternoon, morning, or maybe evening, wherever you may be. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Darren Pope. In a few moments, Victor Farsick will be here. And we are the podcast hosts, or the host of a podcast called DevOps Paradox. And on Fridays, we do this live show called DevOps Paradox Live. And we talk about the things of the week that we may have done, that we may have seen. And more importantly, it's the weekend. So if you have your drink, go ahead and get it out. Mine is boring. It's just water today. So that's all it is. Thanks for joining us live if you're with us here live. And if you're watching this on replay, be sure to watch all the way till the end. That's all I got to say about that. If you're live with us, you'll already be watching it anyway. So let's get into what we talked about this week on the podcast. This was episode 105, and this was, does history repeat itself? And the short answer of that is yes. In different variations, different forms, but history ends up repeating itself all the time. Now, you might agree with that, you might disagree, that's okay. But just for me being old, I've been seeing things repeat themselves a lot. So if you haven't listened to that yet, go ahead and listen to it. Podcast comes out every Wednesday at 6 a.m. Eastern. And it's always 6 a.m. Eastern, no matter whether it's summertime or just normal standard time. So let me go ahead and clear that off. And we're still waiting for Victor. Let me just a moment. Let me message him in Slack, just because it is Friday and we'll see. All right. Okay, there we go. So let's talk about some of the news for the week. Not that one yet. That was a little too... Actually, we'll talk about this until he gets here, and then we'll get into it. So KubeCon EU is this upcoming week. Since that's coming up next week, man, there was like practically no news at all this week. So the little bit of news that we do have, we've got some good tools to take a look at this week. But just in general, I think everybody is still holding off for KubeCon for next week. I'm guessing that most everybody is. I did see that Microsoft, specifically Azure, made a big acquisition this week. We may or may not talk about that. I don't have the notes for that, but I think the big things will be happening next week. But the one thing that did happen is Dependabot. If you're using Dependabot in any of your application development, or just if you're using GitHub, Dependabot preview is now gone. You can no longer sign up for it. Plus, Dependabot.com is no longer available either, as of, I believe this was yesterday, the 29th. Yes, that was yesterday. By the way, for people in the US, if you're watching, today is the last day you can watch Kong versus Godzilla, because it goes off HBO Max today. I mean, you can always go to the theater and pay for it, but that's it. Okay, there you are.
Yep, I had some trouble connecting.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, I'm putting the water away. I was just talking about before you showed up. KubeCon is next week, and that's the reason why we don't have much to talk about today. We always have things to talk about, but there's just not much news this week.
It's exactly the same like last year, right?
Yeah.
Before KubeCon US. Few weeks before, there was almost nothing, and then 1 or 2 weeks before, there is literally nothing.
Yeah.
Or almost.
And then it will be the floodgates open. So... But so KubeCon, we'll probably have more things to talk about next Friday. Actually, it's the 7th. What is the 7th? Is that going to be Friday? Here, I'll let you look it up, because I don't know.
I'm not sure. Next week sometimes.
Okay, sometime.
I know that I have a session the day before. Yeah.
Oh, you're speaking at KubeCon.
It's pre-recorded, and it's not KubeCon. It's day 0. I'm speaking within a cross-plane event.
Oh, okay. But it's pre-recorded. Are you going to be there? Are you going to be there live or no?
Yeah, I mean, I will be there for Q&A and stuff like that.
Okay. We might talk about that a little bit more at the end, about where we're going to be. But anyway, Dependabot is now gone. GitHub Dependabot is now there. And I've been seeing pull requests come in from GitHub Dependabot in a very fast fashion over the past 24 hours. So have you used Dependabot on any of your repositories?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's one of those things that can be extremely useful or extremely annoying depending on what you're doing.
Yeah. Annoying is usually where I get it. It's like, okay, I need to mute this a little bit because I'll check it out. But here was the thing. It's sort of like saying goodbye to a few features. And this might cause some grief to people. Let's start with the middle one first. PHP environment variable registries. Okay, doesn't hurt my feelings any. Probably shouldn't have been there to begin with. But now you can GitHub action it to pull those dependencies. Okay, fair enough. Gone. This is the one that I think most people are going to have a problem with. No more live updates.
I was I liked the idea of live updates initially, and then I started hating them. I think it's more useful to have updates as, when you maybe create a pull request or when you execute some pipeline, because that's where I'm concentrated on those things. Mm-hmm. If I get whenever I get the notification, hey, there is this dependency that should be updated, and I haven't done anything with that repo in a while, most of the time I ignore it. Right? Kind of like, it's nice. I want to keep all the dependencies always up to date, but it's not realistic.
Yeah, especially when you're doing lots of changes. But we've got a tool today that might make that easier. So we'll talk about that after a while. But then this final one is auto merge. I understand why they're pulling it out. It makes sense. Because, yes, you should be verifying your dependencies. Right? But assuming that you had automated the verification, I sort of miss it. Now, there are other ways to do auto merge. Right? So this isn't a big deal. I think probably this is a big... Would you think this is a money-saving thing more than anything else?
I don't know. I mean, auto merge, I never dared to actually enable any auto merge.
Yeah.
I would like auto PR. Yeah. So it creates a pull request, and then I run whichever automation I have as a result of creating a pull request. And then whether that pull request will be merged as a result of me running some type of automated validation or no would be a separate thing.
Yeah. So anyway, Dependabot has now been completely assimilated into GitHub. I think it's a good thing. I don't have a problem with it. It makes sense. But get ready for your PRs. That's all I'll say.
Exactly.
Okay, we've already talked about KubeCon. We're going right into tools today because there was literally no news of any importance. Well, since we did things a little bit out of order, this is the tool I was talking about. Our friend Patrick tweeted about this about an hour ago, I think. Maybe an hour and a half ago. And even though it says 2.0, this is the first release, but what this is turbolift, a simple tool to help apply changes across many GitHub repositories simultaneously. Now there's going to be a little bit of a story with this and one of your videos for this week. So the way that I see this is what we were just talking about. I have to update a bunch of different repositories with the same dependency. This can make that a no-brainer. And then the dependencies on this, and we'll talk more about it later, it has a dependency on the GitHub CLI.
Makes sense.
We'll talk about that a little bit later. And the basic usage is init, figure out the repos, do a mass clone. This feels almost like a mono repo creator. Make changes to every repository, commit the changes to every repository, create a PR for every repository. And this is the expected flow.
Yeah, that's a lifesaver. It's especially since I like that it actually enforces that it creates a PR. So it still leaves others the option to choose whether to accept that change.
Right. And actually this afternoon I'll be sending this off to some of my coworkers, especially for what we do. This could be a big one. Big. Anyway, so turbolift.
Sounds good. Did we speak about something similar some time ago?
We have, and I was trying to find the notes on it, and I couldn't find it in time today since this just came in. So
Yep. I already
have to find
forgot what it was.
yeah, and well, if it was yesterday, even if we talked about it yesterday, we would have forgotten what it was. We just would have remembered. I'm surprised you remembered it, but sorry, I was a little rude. I've been rude to you recently.
No. I'm surprised that I remembered it as well.
tfquery. What do you think this is? Without you seeing it, don't look at the thing. Don't look at the about.
Terraform query.
But it's using, really, for real, a tfquery, and you can run SQL queries on basically the state file. So like this first example, select count star as count from resources. That tells me I have 42 resources. Or give me the yarns, or give me the buckets. This seems like magic. I know it's not.
Yeah. It's kind of, basically, is this very similar result as if I put things as outputs in Terraform?
I would have to say yes by looking at this example.
Similar,
here.
conceptually, right?
Yeah.
I mean, more flexibility. I can choose at runtime what I want to see. But normally, all the important information I would put in outputs.
Yeah. Let's look at the why, because I did not read the why. Blah, 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 blah. Grepping and searching for resources in Terraform state files is not enough. Terraform modules are automating processes dynamically. Okay, fair enough. So searching for static resources is also not feasible for good visibility. So you have to look at the state, because the state file is the truth, right? Or it's supposed to be.
Yeah, kind of. Depends. I mean, if you want to see what you want to have, then state file is the correct thing. Now, it will not tell you what you have. It will tell you what you want to have.
Correct. So, and then blah, blah, blah. It is Python. And then handles the migrations. And there's that. So.
What would be cool, and I don't know, I haven't used the tool yet, but what would be cool if it would combine querying of the state file with the plan. So if we go to the first example, it says, okay, you have 57 resources, something like that was the first example, right?
Right.
You have this number of resources. If it could tell you, you have this amount of resources defined in Terraform, and you have the same or a different number of resources applied. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
If it would combine the state, the actual state with the desired state, which in this case is state file. That would be awesome, I think.
Import states into database. I'm trying to see if it's... Just trying to see if there was anything here in the help. Give it a state file directory. Yeah, I don't see being able to pull the plan in. Here, let's just do this real quick. Allows parsing of plans. This is, okay, let's figure out what this is. These are ideas. So that is an idea.
Okay. So, okay, I was close to what they're planning to do. Cool.
Yeah. Well, it's an idea. Planning, that might be too strong of a term. Okay, tfquery, in case you need it. ShellCheck, this is not new. This is like super old, as in 6 years type old. But I was doing some prep for a video that I just finished about static analysis, and it was like, hey, I remember this, ShellCheck. It's a static analysis tool for shell scripts. If you got to write a shell script, you might as well at least not do the stupid things, right?
Yeah.
So it helps to have a little bit of help, like don't use $ on variables inside of double parentheses.
Yeah, it's linting, basically.
It is.
Nice.
But again, the good thing is this is like the 072 came out 2 weeks ago, but this has been 25 plus releases. Here, let's go old school. Let's go back to, in other words, it's been a while. So 2013, 8 years ago.
Now, what I would really like to see, I like getting feedback as soon as possible. So any type of linting, I want to see it in my IDE or editor of choice.
Yeah. Okay, well,
Not
let's see.
necessarily as a separate, in your editor. Okay, actually, there it is.
In your editor. So
Vim, Emacs,
Vim, Sublime,
VS Code,
Atom, VS Code, ShellCheck.
Nice. Yeah, that's what I want.
I would have expected something like this being 8 years old, right? And it's been around. It's got services that already have ShellCheck pre-installed. Sonar has handling with it. Yeah.
Nice.
Now, this is the one thing I was testing it on CentOS, and I ended up having to install the Apple distro or the Apple repo. So that was the only thing I had to do.
Yeah.
But no big deal. There's homebrew for it as well. So why do I keep using CentOS? People keep asking me, why are you using CentOS? Why aren't you using Ubuntu? It's like, because I like CentOS. It's just because it's what I use. I'm not opposed.
Fair enough.
I'm not opposed to Ubuntu or any of the Debian-based. It's just I'm more comfortable in a Fedora-based. I don't know why, but it's just habit, I guess. Okay, next. You probably don't have this in the EU, but HelloFresh is a meal delivery service, or basically we ship you all the goods and then you cook it for yourself. That's what HelloFresh is. You probably have something similar over there, right?
Okay. So it's kind of fresh food, not pre-made.
It's not pre-made. No, it's not packaged meals. It's, hey, here's the potato, here's the parsley, here's the packaged meat, here's the whatever it is, and it's a meal in a box that you still have to cook.
Okay.
So that's who HelloFresh is. Which I wouldn't have thought of them as a open source contributor, but hey, everybody is, I guess. This is a performance tester in the Kubernetes cluster. So let's get down to why. And Kangal is actually a shepherd dog. So that's the reason why big ugly dog up top. It can spin up an isolated environment in Kubernetes to run performance tests with different load generators. So using the one that they support right now is JMeter, Fake, and Locust. Hopefully they'll get K6 in there, but basically you can test within the cluster itself. So instead of exercising outside of the cluster, you're exercising within the cluster. Would that destabilize things? Could be, but that's actually a good thing to know, right?
Exactly.
So this is just an interesting tool. They, was it recently open sourced? Oh, months ago. Yeah, but it just showed up on my radar a few days ago. So load testing within the cluster.
Nice.
So simple. Loft brought out vcluster. Now you and I went back and forth on this. And create a fully functional virtual Kubernetes cluster within a cluster. And before you say anything else, this is a 0.1 release. It's based on K3s. So they basically put K3s in a single pod and put that pod inside of a cluster. Now let's talk about what you and I talked about. Do you remember?
No. You already started this session by saying that I don't remember, that neither of us remembers more than a day.
Well, that's if we talk about it. If we write it down, we tend to, or type it, we tend to remember a little bit more.
Yeah.
You mentioned KubeVirt.
Yeah, so it really depends what it's for, right? I can see the value maybe, somehow, for testing, kind of, hey, I want to spin up a temporary cluster where I do things. No, actually, I take that back. Why would they spin? I'm not sure I see why would they do that. Why not just a namespace where I deploy resources?
And that was my thought. Why do I need, except for isolation, that's the only thing I can think, is I would rather give somebody a completely, because it isn't a single namespace, you don't have to have admin privileges, but within that cluster, I could have admin privileges. Now, good, bad, or indifferent, you could do it.
But that's the part I don't get is if you don't trust enough a container from security perspective, then putting additional containers inside of a container, I'm not sure how would that bring me peace of mind. Right?
Yeah.
So either containers are secure enough or they're not. If they're not, creating clusters inside of a container instead of creating multiple containers looks like it's the same thing to me.
Yeah. And what's interesting here is it says no performance degradation. So I've got K3s running in a pod on a cluster, but when I schedule my pod, the pods are actually scheduled on the underlying cluster. So they're not running within. So I'm thinking, okay, well, that still means there's some privilege escalation that could happen there. At least in my head, that could happen.
I think it sounds silly, kind of no performance degradation. So if I have option A to run my, let's say, deployment that creates a replica set that creates pods directly in a cluster or shove it all inside of a container, how can that be no performance degradation compared to the first option?
Yeah, I don't know.
It can only be the same or more because there is always an overhead of something, additional something.
Yeah, because I'm looking here. So the deployment and the CRDs and whatever stay up, but the pods go below. The pods and services go actually on the host nodes, it looks like. I don't know.
There might be some hidden advantage.
Well, since we have a minute, let's go see if there is a hidden advantage. Run inside regular namespaces. Okay, so this is it right here. So this is their comparison. So separate namespace for each tenant, which is what you were proposing.
Yeah, you're getting that no matter what, right?
Yep, and a separate cluster for each tenant, which would be silly, but some people do that. So here's the key. Separate cluster is very strong versus very weak isolations. It looks like they're sort of living in the middle there.
Yeah, I mean, it's, either it's a container or it's a virtual machine or it's a whole cluster.
This feels like when I'm using VirtualBox to spin up a VM. That's what it feels like.
Now, if they use, what's the name? Is it KubeVirt or something like that, right? If they spin up a virtual machine inside of that Kubernetes cluster, which you can do these days, and then inside of that virtual machine, they use K3s to create a Kubernetes cluster, then I would say, okay. So the things are running inside of a virtual machine. That's isolation. I get a new cluster. But then that's not much different than the thing on the right side, very strong.
Yeah. I was just trying to
it's almost kind of like, hey, we discovered this cool thing, and now we need to figure out what is the kind of like, what is the use case? It's almost like other way around. Hey, instead of we have a problem, let's solve a problem. We have a solution. Let's find out which problems it solves. Am I being too negative now? Maybe.
Maybe. But I haven't tried it. You haven't tried it. We're just looking at the marketing side of things. Actually, here, let's look at the code real quick. So the question is, if we wanted to figure out if this had KubeVirt in it, where would we look?
They would mention virtual machine in some
They
form
would
of way.
have.
So it's
Yeah,
not.
I don't think they
it's
are.
not. It's not.
No.
I'm sure it's not.
No, that's the only. Let's do one more search here. No. So again, nothing against Lucas, Fabian, or Rich. I don't know. It would be interesting to understand what the real use case for this would be.
Lucas, Fabian, and Rich, let's do a podcast, then explain it.
Okay. Next up, Direktiv. I thought this was cool. It's recreating things that have already existed, just like all other software is. And yes, Kubernetes is a recreation of other things. But this is, and they even call it out, Direktiv is the equivalent of AWS step functions, Google Cloud workflows, or Alibaba serverless workflows. The difference is it's cloud and platform agnostic. It runs on Kubernetes and runs containers as quote-unquote plugins. So whatever it is, it accepts it and does the thing. I don't have a problem with a generic workflow engine. But how is this any different than Airflow? How is this any different than, no, I haven't looked at Airflow or any of the other different types of engines like this.
I think the difference is probably in the underlying technology, right? They're using Knative and a few other things that are closer to, doing things Kubernetes way.
Yeah. And they go through a simple thing, but let's get down to sort of the canonical image processing. And let me blow this up just a little bit. Actually, let me select it before I do that. Whoops, too far. So classify an image, upload the image to storage, or that's the flow. Classify it, is it safe for work or not safe for work? And then do the thing. But then here's the actual execution process.
Yeah.
So think about, I got an input and then I need to have an output. Workflow. This is workflow. This isn't orchestration, it's just workflow.
Exactly. Why not? I mean, to me, the kind of having type of frameworks or platforms that wrap the tools that make sense and put additional value on top of those tools is always very helpful, right? It's very complicated to figure out, okay, so I'm going to do Knative with maybe this and maybe that, and combining 5 different tools and wrapping them in a way that makes sense is always complicated. It's more complicated than it looks when you start doing those things. So yes, I'm in favor of creating some sort of platforms that combine tools, especially when they're open source.
Yep. Again, why Direktiv? Cloud agnostic, we've already talked about that. Simplicity. Using only YAML and JQ, you should be able to express all the workflow states. And reusable. Okay. Pretty cool. And it's licensed under Apache. I didn't take a look at the other licenses today. I think they were mostly all Apache. Actually, since we have a moment, that's Apache, tfquery, MIT, that's okay. Just because GPL3. Oh, but it's old. Okay, I'm not going to hold that against them. Not going to hold it against them. Apache, KubeVerts, Apache, which I would expect, and then of course this was Apache. So, Direktiv out of like all the tools today other than ShellCheck, which is sort of a different thing. This is the one that looks most interesting to me because I have workflow cases all the time. So that's that. But that also leads us into every one of these steps could be considered to be a microservice, right? Right?
Exactly.
Well, why are you faking microservices?
Okay, I did not see that coming. I see, to be honest, both. I get these such heated discussions with people about their architecture, and it ends up being heated mostly because people tend to use random phrases to describe what they're doing. And then if you use a random phrase, then I generate a picture in my head what that is. And then I don't understand what you're talking about because it doesn't make sense. Typical is like, you probably got similar questions like, hey, how do we put everything in a or 20 microservices in a mono repo? And kind of, okay, let's talk about why do you want them in a mono repo? Because they need to be built together. And it's, okay, man, it's not a microservice. If it needs to be built together, it's not a microservice. Oh, no, it's because it has dependencies between all of them so that they need to be deployed together. Again, it's not a microservice. Now, I honestly do not think that everybody should be doing microservices. I really don't. I see the need for having microservices. I see the need of having monoliths and distributed monoliths and everything in between. That's all okay. But if you tell me microservice, then and you tell me, and I'm using this only as an example, I want to use monorepo, then I already have a picture. Okay, so you want microservices that are independently deployable small applications that have separate lives from any other application and not direct connection with anything else in the system. And then I base my answers on that picture. And it turns out that after an hour, my answers are completely off the topic because my picture of what you have when you said microservices is very different to what you really have. So it's kind of communication problem, I think. When you say any other term, it doesn't have to be microservices. If you say, I'm doing CI, I assume that you're merging to the master at least once a day, right? Because that's what continuous means. And then it turns out that actually you have a branch that you merge to the mainline after a month. And there is nothing necessarily wrong with you merging to the master after a month. But you by saying continuous integration, it never occurred to me to ask you how frequently you merge to the mainline, because I already know how often you merge to the mainline. That's at least once a day. And the rest of the conversation is just completely off topic because that's not what you're doing.
Yeah, when I hear the continuous conversation of, well, yeah, we're continuously releasing once a month.
Exactly.
I don't think you understand what the word continuous means.
So it's very important, and kind of for some reason I have a feeling that in software industry we have much bigger problem with understanding what a term means than anywhere else. Kind of in a normal life, nobody gets confused. Nobody thinks that that when you say my apartment, you actually mean a bridge. Right? Because it's up to interpretation. We know what an apartment is, and nobody confuses and has different interpretations what an apartment is, or a car, or an airplane. But in software industry, it's kind of like, hey, any term can mean anything. Literally, kind of DevOps can be anything. Continuous integration can be anything as long as you're using one of the CI tools. Microservices can be actually 57 applications that needs to be deployed at the same time. No, it's wrong. We need to be better at understanding what something means.
I want to take you to a tweet I saw earlier today from a guy I used to work with, Alex Snaps. I don't think this whole Docker, Kubernetes, and other is doing good to our industry. Don't get me wrong. I think these can be and are useful, but they're getting too pervasive. There must be better ways. And he's right. Because people are trying to use Kubernetes and Docker as their platforms. And we've talked about this based on what Jacques Chester talked about, is all of these things are just tools or toolkit. They're not actually the final thing. Is that right? Wrong?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily agree that there are better ways today, I think that we don't have better ways today than containers and Kubernetes. But if that sentence would be, there will be better ways, of course, because containers and Kubernetes are evolving on one hand, and also somebody will figure out something better at one moment, right? So it's not that there must be a better way. There isn't today, I think, but there will be. Now, and Kubernetes also is much better today than it was last year. And last year is better than it was a year before that. Now, by me saying that there isn't better way today does not mean in any form of way that that's the only way or only thing that everybody should be using. I do not think that everything should be in Kubernetes. When you say best way, I usually by that picture, okay, so if I can start from scratch, I have no constraints through legacy in any form of way. Yeah, containers are potentially the best way. Kubernetes not necessarily. I mean, Kubernetes as well. Now, that does not necessarily mean that you should be using Kubernetes directly. It could be serverless. It could be managed Kubernetes, unmanaged Kubernetes. There are many, many variations of it, and it could be just as easy as Knative. Okay, I almost passed a single episode without mentioning it. So I'm not sure that there are better ways. It's just that those ways do not fit all the scenarios and never will. Does it make sense?
As much as it can on a Friday, yes. And I still have 2 recording sessions to do today, so I'm not completely here right now. I'm trying my best. Okay, so let's talk about the last one, which this sort of loops back to what were we talking about? What was it called? Turbolift? Yeah, turbolift. Turbolift requires GitHub CLI. This is one of the more interesting videos you've done recently. Number 1, it was short, which was nice.
That's good. Yeah.
But number 2 is, and this is something that I'm really trying to drive home to people in the community I work with, is use your CLI tools. That's important. So why is using the CLI with GitHub that much better? Or is it?
I mean, there are things that, to be honest, I do not use Git or GitHub CLI for everything. I do think that the whole process of merging pull requests is most of the time better through the UI for a simple reason, because it's not only the action of merging pull request, it's the action of let me check the code, let me go through the comments, let me see the results of different pipelines, what's or not. So there is a whole process that is potentially much better being visual, more visual than a terminal for merging a pull request. But for everything else, every other operation in GitHub is better through CLI from my perspective. Simply because, when I say CLI, actually, that's not correct. CLI or your IDE, that's also okay. When you so let's say that most people will commit and push a change through the CLI or IDE. We probably agree on that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you git add commit push, doesn't it make more sense to do the fourth action as well to create a PR in the same kind of batch of actions?
Sure.
Then you do git add commit push through CLI, and then you go to the UI to do the fourth and the last action, which is create a PR.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to me? And then there is also the thing that, and I might be kind of going too far with that, but I believe that it's very useful. If you want to document how to do something, it's so much easier with CLI than UI, right? If I would write a wiki for my company saying, this is how you create a pull request, it's so much easier to say GHPR create than open this address, navigate to the right-hand menu, go to the branch that kind of do this and that. It's so much more complicated. And the third reason is automation. I kind of like the idea that automation is a reflection of operations that I'm doing, right? Rather than something completely separate from it. So it's so nice for me to know that, hey, if I write the pipeline, I'm going to execute this, and that happens to be the same thing that I'm executing when I'm doing it manually.
Yep.
I was more talking in general,
yeah.
I think, than specifically to GitHub CLI now.
Yeah. So, GitHub CLI. The links for everything, by the way, if you're watching this on replay or you're with us live and this is the first time you've been here with us, if this is your first time, thanks for hanging out. All the links after the show will be down in the show or down in the description below the video, or within an hour or so, because I actually have to go and paste the things in. I want to go ahead and shift to, where are we? There we are. Go ahead.
First of all, Darin, go back to the picture.
Go back to the picture?
Yeah, exactly. Aren't you ashamed that you're the only one who didn't like it?
I don't understand.
You're the only one who didn't put a thumbs up on the video.
Let's go back. I'm too lazy. I'm too lazy to even click the thumbs up. Yeah, and by the way, if you haven't given a thumbs up to this video yet, go ahead and do that if you're with us here live or if you're watching the replay. Go ahead and hit the thumbs up. And I want to bring up one of the comments that we got. We'll go back to the Kubernetes. Kubernetes is too difficult and fragile to deploy.
Yes.
I understand that. I think that's true if you're trying to do it all. But if you've got a good distribution, I'm choosing my words carefully here. If you have a good distribution, such as GKE, or I'm going to put Rancher in the same, or OpenShift. I'm going to put all three of those in the same bucket. I can't say the same thing for EKS or AKS, I don't think. You can do it.
AKS is also 3 clicks.
No, that's right. AKS is. It used to not be. Way back when.
Yeah, I think
I don't use a whole lot of AKS. But if you're trying to home roll a vanilla or some other distribution, I would agree, yes. And I do agree that K3S is best for small deployments. I'm thinking Edge or the other things, because it's built to do that. And that, of course, that comes back from Rancher, right? K3S is Rancher, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
So I don't disagree with these. I question the first part of the sentence.
Exactly. So K3S seems to be best for small deployments. Yes. I could agree with that.
Let's rephrase that.
It's not easier or more difficult than others.
Yeah, let's rephrase that. K3 is best for small production deployments. Even though it's true for all, K3S is very good for production. Right?
Yeah.
It's what it's built to do. That's its purpose in life.
Exactly.
Didn't you do a video on K3S?
I did a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. I thought you did.
K3, just to make sure that it's not misunderstood, K3S is amazing. But it's not really easier than anything else. Or harder. It's the same.
Yeah. Okay, so you said you've got one session, but it's not at KubeCon. It's a day 0?
Yeah. I'm having some kind of a panel with a couple of other people. I think it was organized by, I forgot the name. I'm terrible with names. Anyways, a panel on a 0-day cross-plane event, day 0 cross-plane event. It was interesting. It was just a conversation. It was a conversation with 3-4 of us. I think it's a good one.
Okay. Is that the only place you're going to be at? So you don't have anything else next week except that one item?
No, I didn't. I think that, let me think. Yes, for this KubeCon, I didn't even submit, to be honest, anything. So my chances of speaking at KubeCon were very low if you don't even submit anything. I was It was some weird situation that I was in between interests, and then whatever I was interested before that wasn't there anymore, and whatever I was about to get interested in. It was too immature yet.
Right. And for people, the call for papers for the CD Foundation is open now, right?
Yeah, for CD Foundation is open. For
DevOps
DevOps World also, I think, just
Yeah.
opened or opened
Yep.
recently.
So if you want to, I'm trying to pull these up. That's the reason why I'm looking off to the side. Events. I am still trying to figure out the Linux Foundation sanity and how they do events. Nothing personal, because I know there's people there that I know, but it's sort of like, what? I don't get it.
I mean, kind of, the more I work with Linux Foundation in general, the more I'm impressed with some things. The problem is that it is becoming,
Yeah.
it's a huge foundation.
Yes.
I mean, it's a foundation of foundations. And then many of the things that make sense at such scale, when you look at them in isolation, kind of like, and apply them only for CDF, it's kind of like, why, right? So maybe Linux Foundation needs a bit more decentralization, I think.
That's okay. Let's think happy thoughts, because
No, it's positive actually.
Yeah, it is.
It's so huge that managing such a huge thing is actually very, very hard.
yeah. Which you would think, why should it be that hard? It's just software people, right?
Oh, kind of go to any of those foundations and spend some time in it, and you see the complexity. Because actually, when you think about it, managing to put many different software vendors, foundations are about open source, and there are always software companies behind open source. Just to clarify, always, and at least if it's successful. Managing to put all those different vendors that are normally fighting with each other, often to death, at the same table is challenging. So managing foundation is a very challenging job.
And we know some people that are actually doing it.
Yeah. So it's much harder than it seems. You think, okay, so how hard can it be to have those 25 open source projects? Very
It's
hard.
It's like what do you call it? Herding cats. Maybe. I don't know.
No, it's herding cats together with dogs, iguanas, and snakes. All in the same room.
In the same 2x2 meter room.
Yes.
Yeah.
And none of them can be fed to others. That's important rule.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? So you've got that one thing with day 0 or 0 day or whatever it is, and that's it, right? Nothing
Yeah,
else.
exactly. Probably. I have no idea. You know that I don't know in advance. I need
Yeah.
to check my calendar. I know that I have nothing going on today.
Okay. Well, that's good. So, and you've already got all your videos recorded for the next 3 weeks, and they're all scheduled.
No, that's Saturday and Sunday.
Yes.
And if I fail, then it's, which I often do, then it's Monday night and Tuesday night and things like that.
Yep. And I'm the same way with the podcast. I haven't, and this is the one that is really good that we're going to have the guest on again, but one of the downsides to it was it went long. Not super long, but long enough for me to where it's probably going to be close to 12 hours of editing. So,
Is it long enough to be 2 episodes, or
No.
too long for an episode but too short for 2? Okay.
yeah, and I couldn't break it up.
That's the difficult one.
Yeah. It's not that, I think probably by the time it's all said and done, by the edits will be about 35 to 38 minutes. Maybe.
Once you take out your katana and start slashing everything.
Katana comes out. I take out the ums, the ahs, the you knows, the yeah. That's what happens. Hey, I'm looking out for our listeners, right? I don't want you to waste 10 or 12 minutes listening to us not being able to speak the English language like I just can't do right there. But that's okay. That's the reason why we do this one live, and there is no edit on this one. 0. There's still an hour and a half worth of work to do after we're done, which is always funny.
Oh, yeah.
The life of a YouTuber, right? Is that what we are? No.
I mean, in a way, we are. Just that we are hobby YouTubers
hobbyists,
with the full-time jobs
Yep.
that often demand more than 40 hours a week.
Often?
I was being generous.
Okay. And speaking of that, often, why don't we wrap it up early today? Because you probably have another meeting to go to in 10 minutes, right?
Probably.
Let's do that. Let's call it good for today. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and right underneath Victor, or depending on if you're mobile, somewhere else, click on subscribe. Hit that bell. You'll be notified anytime we do new content, which is usually Fridays. For the time being, it's still going to be around this time. I'm going to see if I can get us moved back to our previous time, unless you really like this time. There's pluses and minuses to this time. Like getting Victor to show up on time has been hard. That's truth.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no, it's true. I cannot deny it.
And the other one was a little bit easier for whatever reason. Of course, everything else has changed, so maybe it's no different, even if we moved it back 2 hours. So, all right, let me go ahead and get this going here. So again, we should be back next Friday around this time, if everything goes according to plan. And let's see what else. Oh, the podcast will be out Wednesday at 6 a.m. Whether I sleep between now and then is a whole nother conversation that we won't get into now. So thanks for hanging out with us. If you were here with us live, why was that so hard to say? Thanks for hanging out this long, especially since we can't talk. And we will talk to you again next week.
Cheers.